JD, you can feel free to bring us in.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all so much here. I want to thank Kendrick and Sabrina for coming together to have this powerful conversation. Today, we're going to talk about beliefs and disability and that intersection and how it meets and how it kind of guides specifically Reverend Kendrick and has guided kind of me. So this session is not about telling folks what to believe. It's not towards pushing you to any specific religion. This is really about open and honest conversation about religion. If you have, I mean, specifically about the experiences that us in the room have had. If you have any questions, please feel free to jump in the chat and throw them out there, and I will be watching. You can use the put your hand up on Zoom. I'm also watching for that. So really, whatever really works for you in terms of asking those questions. Again, I would love to stress and like to stress that this is not about what to believe. This is not about pushing religion on you. This is about us talking about our, we anticipate that this will be kind of like red table style, where we just really talk about our journeys in connection to, but before we start, I'd like to read a bit about Kendrick, our guest speaker. If you just give me a second, I should have had it up, but I got it. You know, I'm a 90s baby. I do everything last second. And that's not a great excuse, but it's the one I'll use today. Reverend Kendrick Arthur Kemp Sr. was raised in upstate New York in Lyons. He is ordained in the American Baptist Churches of Metropolitan New York. He earned his Masters of Divinity from Union Theological Seminary in New York City and has an MSW from Binghamton University. And so we want to thank you so much for today, Kendrick. And so I'll kind of start this off. If you could tell us a bit about your journey, right, and how you got to be a reverend.
Well, thank you. I wanted to say thank you for Starbridge, to the organization, having me here today, because this is very, very important conversations around disabilities. Your question, how I got here, I'm a PK. If anybody knows a PK, I'm a pastor's kid, and my grandfather's pastors too. So I was like really engulfed in religion all my life. But when I was almost turning 20, something happened to me. It changed my whole life. I had a stroke. And 2 years after, I had another stroke. It changed my life, and I had a lot of anger. I had what they talk about the stages of grief. I had the anger, denial, and I was bargaining, because I wanted my life back. I didn't want this life. I was all state in every sport I played. I remember winning the states in Rochester, New York, in basketball, So I wanted that life back, but I had 2 strokes and I could walk or talk. It left me with a lot of depression. I didn't feel like I was included. I was a different person. I really, really didn't want that. So I stayed in the shadows. I was going to my family church because my father was a pastor there. So I was like, I was safe there. But in the world, I was very, very vulnerable. Very, very vulnerable, and people looked at me different. You know, they looked at me like I was a freak, or and a lot of people knew me before my strokes. So people looked at me different, but I looked at myself different. You know, and so it was a really, really crucible time. So I was wrestling with this God. Why would God do this to me? So I had those questions, where was God at? So I had, so I wrestled with these questions for a long time, and I remember going to my father, asking him, about why this happened, and he didn't have a answer for me. So I've been on this path of disability work after that. So I do it in the presentations and preaching in different ways. I do this work in all over the world. I hope I answered your question.
You did. I think as a woman, I'm not really religious, so I'm not going to sit up here and pretend like I'm in the front of the church and I'm like, best friends with God. I think I got a line to God, but I'm, the way my line works, it does what it needs to do, and he's always on time. But I think that for me, physically being disabled, and so I was born this way, I have cerebral palsy, and interacting with church folks has always been complicated, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to really have this conversation with you, because, to me, religion and disability is a very complicated relationship, right? Because oftentimes what I find people wanting to do is to pray that I get cured or that I get fixed, or that, they tell me that this chair is part-time, that in another life I'll be walking. And it's just like, but I built this life and I worked really hard on this one. And I've, worked really hard to learn how to love me, just like kind of you're saying that, after your strokes, you had to relearn who you were and really think about who you wanted to be and how you existed in this space. So, right, you were safe at your dad's church, but in the rest of the world, it was a bit more complicated. And so I think that really that's why I want to talk about this intersection, right? Because it's not always the easiest, the most comfortable. And so how do we start having conversations in the space of church, in the space of religion, or even in the space of faith and belief, right? Even if we take a church away, if we're just talking that, like for me, like I told you, we spoke when we were planning this, that I just believe in a higher being. So how do we really just have those conversations, but not, pew pew or like yuck my yum of my disability, right? Because it's part of my identity and I'm so proud of it. So how do we get to have those conversations in a healthy way? Like as a reverend, as you're leading, other folks in their spiritual path, as you're, continuing to grow in your spiritual path, how is it that you highlight and hold up your disability and stand proud in that piece of your identity?
Thank you for sharing. It depends where I go. I know for me, I do Black liberation theology of disability. It's really looking at it's coming from, growing up, and the symbols they didn't reflect me. So we was borrowing symbols from white Christians, churches, and it didn't work for me. I'm like, I can't get down like I can't do this, So so I did. I really looked at inside myself, and I know my higher being directs me to certain people and places. I call it energy work, So so I really promote people living with disabilities in leadership, because when I see people look like me in leadership, it liberates me, and I go to meetings and I push the space, to be inclusive, don't just invite me in and let me say something at the end. Let me be the part of the fabric of the foundation. If you don't let me do it, I'll push my way. And if and sometimes the space is not for me, so I go to other spaces who is part of my my journey, and sometimes I make spaces, because some spaces they got their own theologies, and ideologies, so and mesh in their own ways. I have to create something else. I can do that though, without putting others down. Letting people live. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes all sense. What I really, then it got me thinking about really is, so how did you, because so I have had all my life, to develop my identity as a woman with a disability, and then, figure out how faith works for me. But for you as a preacher's kid, you've been working on your faith, identity your whole life. And then at 20, all of a sudden you have these strokes, and now you're having to develop your identity as a disabled man who also happens to be a preacher's kid, who also happens to have the desire to be a reverend or to run a church or to have his own or congregation, I guess you could say. So how is it that when you were in the midst of the roughest parts of developing your identities, right, when they were meeting, and I'm assuming that sometimes they were clashing, and this is just an assumption, and you tell me if I'm wrong, because even me, like, I've gone to churches and they're like putting their hand on my forehead and they're like, yo, you're gonna stand up. And then I'd stand up and take a step and they're like, she's healed, she's fine, God, you did it. And it's like, well, no, I could have always took a step. Like that always worked for me. It's the following steps that were a little bit harder that I would have failed if the person who was also holding me didn't catch me. Like, you know what I mean? So how is it that when you were in the midst of developing or growing, I guess it's not developing because we don't look at it that way, into the man that is Reverend Kendrick Kemp and who also is disabled, when you were in those parts, how did you merge those identities so that you can float and exist in that space comfortably, if that makes sense?
Yes, thank you for this question. This is a very important question for me too, because I was wrestling with my beliefs for a long time. I still do that wrestling. But I remember in the early 90s, I went to used bookstore because I was trying to find identity. I was living in Ithaca, New York, and it was Cornell University. They had the Africana Center. I used to go up there every day to have community. You know, they invited me in, you know, and I remember going to a bookstore, a used bookstore, and I saw this book. It was Black Power and Black Theology, you know, and it just hit me. You know, I'm like, whoa, it was by Dr. James Hal Cone. See, I didn't know what theology was, you know, I couldn't even say it, you know, but you know, it just caught me. So I bought the book, and me and my friend went back to my house, and he started reading. He started reading it to me, and you know, I was like, man, I found myself. He was talking about, you know, Blackness, looking at the Bible and the world through your Blackness, you know, in a theological lens, you know, a spiritual lens, you know, and I needed that. And then I had a chance to study under him at Union. I went to Union just because he was there, and Dr. Cornell West. They was my advisors. And the space wasn't accessible, but I wanted to learn from them, so that overrode the accessibility at the time. You know, once I got in, I started a caucus, justice, disability justice, and the first thing we did, we put in a door, accessible door. So I just needed to get in and move around the space and start doing my work. But that book started me really growing and asking myself, you know, and he, late Dr. James Cone, he really pushed me, you know, because I said, I remember I went to his office and sitting down, and I said, Dr. Cone, I love your work, but your work don't say nothing about people living with disabilities. And he said, you're right. He says, Ken, that's your work. And the way he said it and how he just took me in, you know, I knew I had to do this work, you know. So, and Dr. Cornell West did the same. They just took me, you know, they really took me in. They taught me the language, you know, and they was on my side. They are freedom fighters, you know, and they said, you know, Ken, you are with us, you know, and a lot of different people came. I studied with a lot of different people. Yes.
Thank you. I think that your response got me thinking, like, you know, how we have to learn to shift our view of faith and spirituality, right? It doesn't just exist in a church. I don't know if you remember when we were planning this, I told my mama that because I couldn't come in the front door of a church, God said I didn't need to be there. And you told me, you said that's not true. You said that that's not what this is. And I think that when you're talking about accessibility and you're talking about creating space for people with disabilities in the spirituality realm, for me, I guess my question to you is, as you're building this space, how did you build community for the people that weren't necessarily your mentors, for the people that you were trying to, you know, reach out to fellowship with, to create relationship with? Because, and again, this is an assumption, you know, I'm assuming that at your dad's church, there was love, but that you weren't always met with this love at every congregation that you visited, at every church that you visited, because your body was different and there were different needs. And I feel like we often have this conversation about, you know, churches and religion and spaces, but it's often from the people who are the leaders of these spaces, not necessarily the folks who are in the crowd. So when you were in the crowd of other churches and other spaces, so you said that they told you this was your work and they added a door, but did you ever meet in a space spiritually where they weren't willing to create these accommodations for you so that you could be a fruitful member of the congregation, of the space that you were in?
Thank you for this question, because this is very important. Just in my father's church, they tried to put me on the side, you know, so I wasn't welcome. And, you know, I was always vulnerable, you know, so I had to ask the questions. I had to, one of the questions I asked, you know, do I want to do this in this church or this place? Do I want to, you know, bring my energy in this place? If I want to, I have to go ahead and find allies in the place. But you know, it's hard work. But my spirit leads me. When I let my head lead me, I get frustrated, a lot of fear, all these, you know, negative, you know, vibes, you know, it ground me. It just takes over. You know, I get paralyzed, per se, you know. So I really let my spirit lead me, you know, because a lot of times it's not, I say this a lot, this is messy, it's very messy, it's very messy, you know, so I have to step back and analyze, you know, and critique myself. Before I even start trying to critique others, I gotta critique myself. I said, well, Ken, why they got you so upset? So when I do that work, you know, I'm better, you know, because I'm doing the deeper work for myself. You know, I remember growing up, my grandfather was blind in one eye. And my aunt, she had disability, and they should have her in the back room, you know, but nobody talked about, you know, this family dynamics, you know, but I said, you know, one day I'm gonna be able, I want to, you know, be in a place to really discuss, you know, the different things we go through, you know, and I think I'm in that place today, but I can't do this work by myself. I won't do it by myself. I'm not on an island by myself, you know. Yeah. I hope I answered your question.
Oh, I think you did. And so I guess my next question, and I hope it's not too personal, and if it is, you be like, JD, get out my business. But, my next question is about, you've had the opportunity to work with a lot of folks in developing your, one, you're developing your curriculum, but two, like really developing yourself and your belief and how strong it is, and you've grown as a disabled man. So what were some of those tough conversations that you had with your dad as the leader of your church, right? Once you were comfortable in your skin, as being disabled. So for me, I've had those tough conversations with my family members, but it is not it's not in such a heavy state like, religion or even faith. For me, it's like, well, no, I'm taking my wheelchair on vacation. And if you don't like that, well, I'm not going. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and those are the tough conversations I've had to have. But for you, how has it been to have those kind of conversations, not only with your father, but with other mentors that you are a fan of, that you're learning from, when it was your turn to teach them? Because it's hard when you've been in that seat as a student for so long that now you're a teacher. How is it that you had those conversations? What were the things that you shared with them about being disabled? What were your takeaways that you wanted them to have? And after you had those conversations, did your father change the ways in which he preached and the way he brought in folks into a space? Did you see that happening with your mentors as well? And I know that's a harder question to answer, and it's a lot, but whatever you can give us, we'd be grateful for.
All right, thank you for this question. It's a very, very deep question. One thing, me and my father relationship wasn't close. It wasn't close. He's passed away. But I remember as a Black person back in the 80s, 70s, 80s, we just I don't know if you ever heard this phrase, seen but not heard. Our family, or our community, children, didn't meddle with grown folks, and so it was hard. I had to find the courage, and a lot of times I found that courage in alcohol, in drugs, and it helped me to express myself, and until it took over, because we was like invisible per se. We was in a place, we was in a place, but a lot of my mentors, they gave me the space, but I had to find the courage. When I was beat so much and I wanted to learn a new way, I found that courage. And sometimes God or my higher power gave me that courage to reach out. So because I didn't have it sometime, but my spirit, gave me the courage to ask questions, some important some important questions. You know, I know I'm not perfect. So asking questions when it feels not safe, you know, that's the practical work you got to do. You know, you got to do that stuff. You know, I try to, you know, don't do it, you know, but want to reap the rewards. You know, no, I had to go. I had to swim in that stuff. You know, and some people don't like me, but see, I like myself. I can look in the mirror today. If a person don't like me, I don't, you know, I want people to like me, but see, I want myself to like me more, you know? So yeah, it's a dance I have to do. I know because we're dealing with racism, sexism, ableism, you know, every day it's coming at us. It's always coming at us, you know, and I can do that too. I can get involved in that too, in tearing people down. So I do my um my my spiritual, you know, things I do before I even leave the house. I really do that, you know, because it might save me by saying something I can't take back because I've been there. Yes.
Thank you. I really appreciate you saying that. I mean, I think that I do this dance too. I just don't, my dance is at work. I just don't want to be fired. I be trying not to be too black so I don't get fired. So it's a little bit different, but you know, it's always heavy is the burden of the first. And I think you've shared that with us multiple times. And I want to ask you one more question, and then I kind of want to open it up to see if anyone in the audience has a question. Or if Sabrina might want to chime in or jump in. But my next question to you would be, as someone who, if you were talking to someone who was a part of a congregation, who was a part of a faith-based group, and they were uncomfortable and they were feeling not seen, not heard, not valued in that space, what would your advice to them be? You know, what would you guide them to do so that they could feel a stronger connection either to their community or, you know, or whatever it is that their mission in that space would be? What would you advise them to do?
Thank you for this question. I know for me, allies. I have to have allies, you know, and the people that I know they got my back, I can start off with them, you know, having a conversation, you know, and because I know they're there for me. They don't have to have they don't have to be living with a disability, you know, they just there for me. They want the best for me. You know, I know when I was young, I used to try to take it on by myself. You know, I'm gonna do this. You know, I'm like the lone ranger. I cannot I cannot do that. I need to find community. You know, and sometimes community shows up, and you didn't think it was gonna look like that. So just keeping my mind open and really going to the people that really are there for you. And leadership, trying to find allies in your leadership. I don't need everybody to understand me. When I see like a lot of people, they saying, "Yeah, I got you." That backs me up, because we in a world that we got different ideas and things, and we live different, and really I just need some couple people or a community. If I can't I can't find the community, I'll create one. And it don't have to be a lot of people. Just like Malcolm X said, sometimes we gotta go in the closet. I just getting out of my own head. Because I do damage in my head. When I'm with others, it's power. It's a power in that, and sometimes I don't create it. This force creates it. We put different names on it. God. Higher power. All these. But it creates it. When my mind's open, because if my mind is not open, nothing will get in. And a lot of times I close my mind when I got a lot of fear. When I'm afraid, just opening it back up. I hope I answer your question.
I think you did. I think for me, this brought back up when I was graduating in college, and I was afraid that I was gonna like self-sabotage, because I was like, ooh, now that I'm done, what do I do? Like, where does life take me next? And I went into my mentor's office and I was like, yo, like, what happens now? I'm leaving a place where everybody's chasing something to go back to live in the hood where people don't know they don't know outside of their 3-mile radius, like what happens now. And then she broke down power, and she wanted me to understand what power is. And power is such a complex word or thing or feeling, whatever it is that you look at it. And so there's really no way to define it, but other than it kind of takes over and does what it wants. So I thank you for saying that, because that's what it brought into me. And you're right, like when we're in fear, we do damage to ourselves. I want to open up the floor to see if anyone in the room has any questions or comments that they might want to make. Sabrina, if you wanted to jump in or add something. We have actually a question here. So Sabrina, I'll defer to you after. Thank you so much, Tyler, for also putting the poem in the chat. That was great. It really came in on time. But the question is, Kendrick, as a preacher, what ways of inclusion would you most like to see other churches adapt for their congregations?
Thanks for the question. It's a hard question because it's so. I think the churches are missing the mark. I really want to see space is genuine, and a lot of churches are not accessible. You can't even get in the church, because they got steps, and people who can't, navigate the steps or don't use, steps, or are wheelchair users, they can't even get in. Our brothers and sisters, and So there's a lot of different things I want to see. Leadership, because people with disabilities, living with disabilities, when they see leadership looks like them, that's liberation. You know, I want to come back, you know, because I see me, you know, and just having the conversations, like having, groups in the church, forming groups, to ask difficult questions and creating space, not afterwards, just a person with disability comes or physical disability comes in, and then create the space, have that stuff planned before, talk about, people living with disabilities is one of the marginalized that we talk about all the time, but people with living with disabilities, I call it messy, but it's a different kind of marginalization. I can't even say it. I really want to include people living with disabilities voice in the conversation of the church. It can go a lot of different ways, that's because we got other groups who their voice are heard, so we need to keep going to those churches or faith organizations, get our voice heard. And if they can't hear my voice, say it louder or use your allies to help you to create that space.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that'd like to ask a question? You can drop it in the chat. You can unmute yourself, whatever is comfortable for you, whatever would work. We're here for any of that. Sabrina, is there anything you wanted to add or to our conversation? Sabrina is the first lady of her church. So she has a connection specifically to religion through her, one personally. She's also a preacher's kid. I'm the odd man out. I'm not a preacher's kid, but they both are. And as we planned this, we had a robust conversation about religion, spirituality, and faith, and how it really all works and comes together, and where those tough, scabby points are. For me, it's always, I'd love to be honest and let's be real about how religion looks at disabilities, and let's talk about the historical context, because it very much so plays into part as to how we do faith in these spaces. And so I hope that we have kind of touched some of that here today with you all. And Sabrina, I'll give you the floor.
I just want to thank everyone for being here, and thank you so much to Reverend Kemp. When we were planning this session, he and I just kind of took it to our roots and just had a really wonderful conversation. And I'm also a person with a disability. I have 2 metal plates in my back, and although it's an invisible disability, it is that conversation, like JD said, where people say, you're going to be healed or you're going to be this. And I guess the question that I would have for Reverend Kemp is, or anyone who would like to chime in on this, if you would like to add to this, when you come to the point of being okay with who you are and how you are, that feeling that you have, how do you display it to others so that they can walk in your acceptance? And I'll start with Reverend Kemp and anyone else who would like to chime in on that.
All right, thank you for the question. Let me go back. You talk about the healing and the curing. And sometimes we, as faith leaders, get healing and curing, and we interchange it. So a lot of times when they say healing, they're really saying curing you, or fixing you, but they're not saying it, they use that healing. And sometimes they don't understand that, and I remember going to church and they was putting their hands on me, and I was like, just love me. Just love me. And they didn't understand that, and I walked up, in these prayer circles, to be healed, but I really want to be, I just wanted to be loved, and I couldn't say that though, and now I can say it, I'm more comfortable, but a lot of times, the narratives, their theologies around healing and curing and fixing, and it comes out. I'm glad I'm in a place in my life that I see that. I saw it back then, but I didn't have the words. I didn't, and I didn't have the courage, to say anything about it. I acted out different ways, and I just wanted to tell them, I just want to be loved. If you can't do that, it's all right, but don't try to, put this false thing on me. I think I got off on your question. You asked me something else.
No, you actually framed it much better than I ever could, because I said acceptance, but you used the key word that we often like to leave out because we don't want people to feel a certain way. So love is what you're, looking for that. And I think, like you said, you just go into those spaces wanting to be loved. And it's such a challenge because, as you said, in faith spaces, people do want to be fixers. They believe that they have to fix the problem. They have to get the food. They have to make sure the family's okay. They have to make sure people are this way, and and they don't believe this, or and you have just come into a place of just saying, I just want to be loved. I want to come in this space, my gifts, my talents, I'm offering them to you and all of who I am. And that is such a challenge. And what would you say to faith leaders that struggle with that? What would you say?
I had conversations around with faith leaders too. We gotta be transparent. We have to, to lead people, you have to be transparent. I remember when I had my strokes, I didn't want to be a person living with disability because I knew not what others said, what I thought about people living with disabilities. And I engulfed it. People, the narratives around people, who are living with disabilities, they can't think for themselves. And, I had to do that work. Our faith leaders had to do that work too. And a lot of our faith leaders or people, you know, they swarm around people with living with disabilities because it brings up so much in their own selves. It brings so much up, you know, people, you know, they love, you know, gone, you know, you know, all this stuff boils up. They don't know what to do with it, you know, so they push it back down, you know, and it's not helping for them or others, you know. Those are the tough conversations we have to have, but it's got to be a safe space to open yourself up. When being vulnerable, you know, I live in vulnerability every day, but you know, some people, you know, um, it's hard, you know. They're having the courage, you know, to step out there, you know, and you built this life, and you know, you got a family, you know, and you tell me to be vulnerable, you know, but it's just not that easy because it's unraveling a lot of different areas in my life, you know, and I just put that stuff on the shelf and you tell me to bring it back down, you know, I cannot do that. I won't do that. Yeah.
I think that to me is what makes my relationship with faith and religion so complicated, right? Because if I live in a place of vulnerability and here I come to you and you tell me that my one big fix is that you fix the one thing that I worked so hard to accept and to grow and to love about myself, and you tell me like I'm gonna pray for that one thing, I can't even imagine myself not being disabled. So if God woke up tomorrow and was like, all right, boo, we gonna change this all for you and you will no longer be in this chair, who would I even be? Like that's such a key part of who I am and what I live for, what I stand for, what I like my work. And so I would fall apart. And so it's like, how do you take the most important part of me and say, I'm gonna take that, and I'm coming to you with vulnerability and saying, hey, I am lost in this and I am trying to find a way out. Can you give me the keys to believe in something? Because really, I just need, you know, if you tell me that God is never late, he's always on time, then I can work with that maybe. But if you telling me, no, he's gonna come, but he's gonna take that one thing he gave you first, and then he's gonna just change it all up. I don't want that. I don't need that. Like that is not the kind of trial I'm trying to take. So thank you for saying that of living in vulnerability, because that is, it is so important for folks to understand that we do live in this vulnerable state of needing, of changing, of oversharing, of having to exist in a space that like sometimes refuses to understand, you know, what it is that we're going through or what it is that we're dealing with. So there's one more question, and this will be the last question. Sabrina in the chat has put out our survey for feedback. Please, everyone who is in the room, please fill it out if you feel so inclined, as we are trying to grow this series. Our last question, Kendrick, and thank you so much for your vulnerability, for your sharing, for your love, and for really taking time out to teach us what this is like for you. The question is, what was the part of Dr. James Cone's Black liberation theology that was life-changing for you?
Thank you for this question, because this is a very important question, because growing up, I remember living in my Blackness in a hostile community. It was Lyons, New York, upstate New York, and it was like two different worlds. it was one white and one black, you know? So we really created our own community, you know? And Dr. Cone, he just told me it was like, it was all right to look at, be in my blackness, be myself, you know, in church, because we was brawling our models from white Christianity. You know, I didn't want that, but Dr. Cone, he really in his work, you know, showed me, you know, it's all right, you know, to believe in your blackness, you know, your experiences, you know, looking at the world and your own being, you know, and I wanted somebody to see it, say that, because Malcolm was saying that too. James Baldwin was saying it. Dr. Katie Cannon was saying it. It was a lot of people were saying it, you know, and I just, you know, and when I read that, you know, it wasn't looking at other cultures saying they doing it wrong. It was just uplifting your own, you know, and that was like, whoa, I need that. I need that today to get today, because it's easy for me to say, you know, I got the keys. Nobody else got the keys, you know. No, I have a key. Mom, I'm on um, it's easy for me to say I got my own key. I got the keys. You know, nobody else got the, you know, the keys. No, I got one key. You know, yeah. So I think it's very important for any culture find their own ways to meet their own spirituality, you know, their own liberation, you know, and Black liberation theology of disability, you know, that's what I created, you know, for us to find, you know, liberate ourselves in the midst of, you know, intersections, you know, because I'm Black, you know, so I can't just say, you know, I'm disabled. You know, it's, you know, I'm dealing with all this stuff, you know, and I know there's faith organizations and churches. There's some are doing a great job. I'm not down at all the churches, you know, because there's a lot of churches and faith organizations and other organizations are doing great work. You know, and we got to, you know, illuminate that too. You know, yeah.
Well, again, I want to thank you so much for today, for your vulnerability, for you sharing your story, for you being just you with us. I love you. And so thank you so much for that. Everyone in the room, please take our survey. And our next session in this series will be July 22nd on disability and sexuality with our local, one of our local activists / advocate, Anita Cameron. We look forward to seeing you all there. Thank you so much for being here today, for taking part in this conversation. Thank you, Joyce, for giving Sabrina and I the opportunity to put this together. We look forward to your feedback, and we are so appreciative of all you in this space. Sabrina and I will stay so that we could pray out. Anyone who is wanting to join our prayer, if you like, please feel free. We won't be recording that part of the session, but this is all, if you like to, you don't necessarily have to be there. Again, thank you.